With me today are some pretty awesome people. We have Barry Littleton, who is, I honestly, to tell you guys the truth, I don't know a whole bunch about him, but I hear he's really cool. He's a hypnotherapist and an experiencer, contactee, and he's just very, very intelligent and very knowledgeable about all sorts of stuff. So we'll talk to him. And then we also have Kimberly from Queen of Swords for Hire. She's a very good friend of mine, and she's also super knowledgeable and cool. And I think we're going to have a great conversation. So that's it.
Thank you for the invite.
That's my introduction. Yeah. I never know how to start these things. So
I think you did fine. Thank you for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Absolutely.
It's good to see you again, too, Kim. Definitely.
Yeah.
I always tell people, you introduced me to Randall Carlson. That was always a very interesting time for me. Very cool.
Yeah. Well, and then I got to stand there and listen to you guys talk with like in the 180 IQ range or something. It was really impressive.
That cat's heavy. He's the real deal.
He studies the earth, and he is really knowledgeable about the past and like what created. I'm not going to say. You know what, Barry? Do you want to explain it better?
You know what I took he's got a lot of information out there, more than I'm aware of, I think. But what I took a specific interest in was his the end of the ice age, how the ice age ended, the driest period, and how you had these meteors that came in and hit certain places, and you can identify where some of them hit and impacted. They always say, "Where's the crater?" He kind of proved that on several of them, and so he kind of just brought some of those things forward. He's quite ingenious. We hear a lot about how the ice age started, but not how it ended, and how we got plummeted, and how the only place safe was underground, and that whole type of catastrophe, and how some of those meteors hit the one that hit the Greenland Bay ice shelf, threw up all these fragments that hit other places on Earth, like created the Carolina blue bays, like those circular holes or things that are quite interesting. He's fascinating. So I encourage anyone to look into his whole thing about that. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
He'll pick a region and tell you about it. He'll explain how Canada was completely covered in ice, and then as it melted, how the water was so intense that it created canyons and walls, and it's really cool. But in addition to that, he does talk about people will ask him about Göbekli Tepe or the mounds here in the United States, and he'll give his very educated explanation. He knows a lot about symbolism. He's really cool, like super cool. So Barry and I were at Disclosure Fest, and that's where I met Barry. And we went to the private dance that was being held at the Luxor for the event that night. And as we were walking in, I guess I had left to do something, came back, and I met Randall Carlson in the hallway. And then when Barry was with me, I introduced them. And then I just listened to them talk. It was really cool.
A lot of his stuff is being backed up by science that he's saying. He's being validated. So I think that's pretty cool. You know what I mean? Like we were talking about off air, science isn't the answer to everything, but it is a good foundation for some things, for us to get at least a knowledge base and kind of go forward, and incorporate that with the esoteric, and things change,
Yeah,
anyway.
Exactly.
No, and like Barry, extremely polite and very easy to talk to, and didn't make me feel like I was taking his time, or like he was a nice. It was nice to run into him, and he's a very authentic and genuine person in person.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I'll check him out. Maybe I'll have a conversation with him.
Check out what he says about Moo, Gina, Moo, and Atlantis. Check that out.
Oh yeah. Oh man, I would love. Yeah. I would love to talk about that for sure. I've always been interested in, because I live in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which, has Lake Superior up at the top. That's where I am. And then there's Lake Michigan. We're surrounded by the Great Lakes, and the Great Lakes were formed by the glaciers. But at the same time, scientists are finding these like a mini Stonehenge at the bottom of Lake Michigan. It's like, how did that even get there if it was formed by glaciers, you know? Like it's super interesting
I
movie.
know.
Yeah.
I have my theories.
You know,
Yeah.
that goes into that whole terraforming thing. You know, I got a friend,
Mm.
Jock Doubleday, that talks a lot about that and how you have
Oh, okay.
terraforming that went on that actually Earth is geoengineered. And it's,
Mm.
you know, how many planets are. It's quite fascinating. We start getting into that and how many things have been hidden from us, you know.
Well, that right there would be proof of a civilization that not only existed before this Younger Dryas period that we're referring to, which is when everything was frozen, but if something existed, how long did it take to build? If it took them 15 years to build, then they were already a civilization that understood how to build things, which means that they had already come a long time and had probably existed for 10 to 20,000 years prior to that. So every time we have a find like that, it sets back the calendar, which really annoys archaeologists. Don't like
Mm.
their what they went to school to learn about, and the time, basically the timeline. They don't want a timeline changed. I'm sure most archaeologists would be open to a discovery, right? But
Mhm.
not something that's going to change everything they know to be true, because it's almost like a religion. You know, if your religion's disproven, that then it disrupts everything you've invested your whole life into.
Mm.
I agree.
Anyway.
You know, there's one, like, I understand that, Gina, you have a connection with Sasquatch.
Oh yeah, I sure do. You want to talk? Let's talk about
You,
Sasquatch if you'd like.
I must say they touched my life. I've never actually seen one, but yet they touched my life. And scientifically speaking, you know, there's a guy, I can't remember this guy's name, but he's an anthropologist, and he did a deal that there was that place, and I think in South Africa they have that tar pit that they
Michael
found all these hominids in,
Michael
like probably
Tellinger.
like 4 or 5 of them, and the name of the hominid is Homo naledi,
Mm.
Naledi. I did a video on that on my channel probably about a year or two ago. But the thing is this, he got together with these other scientists and they put together how Homo naledi would have walked. Now, Homo naledi was about our size, technically, maybe a little bigger, but not much. Okay. And they walked with this double pronouncing of the knees,
Mm.
pronated, which is very odd, and it's not a very solid way to walk. But when you look at that and scientifically look at structurally how Patty walks, and this gentleman I'm talking about in that video, I'll put a link up because these scientists, put together a whole frame of how Homo naledi would have walked. And if you compare it to how Patty walks, as far as the pronation, the double pronation of the knees, it's unmistakable.
Mm.
You know what I mean? And that's something that's something that is not the proper way to walk. You have to be structured for that. You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
very interesting when you start getting the little things. People, there's no evidence, but there really is when you start dealing with some of the things, even footprints on. But all I'll say is that they touched my life, and I think recently I got laughed at for mentioning that Fred Beck, the Ape Canyon guy,
Mm-hmm.
he wrote a book called "I Fought the Ape Men of Mount St. Helens," and it's like a little pamphlet. Okay, like 25 pages or something. But
Right.
he keeps mentioning in there that he's the one that shot one, and that they have these supernatural abilities. And he kept calling them manifested beings
Mm.
that they manifested. And I thought that was just fascinating, but people disconnect. They don't want to talk about that book, or they laugh at anybody saying that the Sasquatch has any type of supernatural abilities or spiritual abilities, or what was, as I said, one guy says, spiritual powers, you know.
Well, it's the same as with the scientific communities. It's like they have their ideas, they have their little box that they put their ideas in, and they do not want to budge. It's like you have the nuts and bolts UFO people, and then you have the ghost people, and it's like all these different little factions. But when you kind of zoom out, it's like, if you think about it, okay, there was a book I read a while back by Whitley Strieber called The Afterlife Revolution. And it was about how his wife had passed away, and she pretty much basically started talking in his ear as soon as she was gone. She was like, it's all the same. The UFOs, the Sasquatch, heaven, it's all just different dimensions. It's all the same thing. And so I find that fascinating. And it's like the more that I learn and the more people I talk to and the more experiences I have, I kind of have a tendency to believe the same thing. I feel like it's all about frequency. It's all about the energy of love. And I think that's it.
Let me ask you a question. I'm picking something up. I'm picking up that you've gotten what they. I don't care for this term, but we'll use it because it's familiar for everybody. That you've gotten mind speak from them. Is that true?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay. It happened to me too. It had to be in the right location. Well, maybe a couple times, but that location was whoa. You know
Up
what
in
I mean?
ECETI Ranch? Was it ECETI Ranch?
Yes. I got.
Man,
I would
I
have to,
really want to go there. I really do.
if you get a chance to go there because I mean
Yeah.
it's a power spot by all means.
That's Mount Edwards, right?
The thing is Mount Adams. And the thing is,
Adams.
I went and spoke there 3 times, 2016, 2017, and 2019. And 2016 I used to speak publicly all the time, but it wasn't over this stuff. I went there and I spoke, and it was one thing, I was unprepared for how remote that place was. Okay. I'd not been to that state and that part of the United States. So the voluptuous beauty was a whole nother thing to behold. But it
Yeah.
was quite remote. And almost a week and a half before going up there, I started just obsessing about albino Sasquatch, white Sasquatch. And I'm looking everything up. I mean, I was tearing up some Thinker Thunker, MK Davis, you name it. I was on all of it. You know what I mean? And I didn't recognize that as any type of communication. I can remember that I was putting together my presentation. My brother's going, "What are you looking at?" Because I kept looking at this, at all the Sasquatch stuff. I said, "I don't know, I'm just kind of interested in that." And he's like, "Man, as much weird stuff has happened to you, you don't really believe in Sasquatch, do you?" I was like, "Oh, well, I got some questions. I know some people that have been out hiking by themselves for too long, and I don't know, but it's not for me to judge."
Mhm.
And then I went there. This obsession, I didn't recognize that as communication. Getting at the gate, I feel like I'm being watched immediately. You know what I mean? And suffice long story short, in the end, before I left, after the conference was over, I can't sleep at night, so I would go. I go out and watch the star of the Field of Dreams. Mount Adams is right there. You see UFOs going in and out, especially around 3:30, 4 o'clock, 4:30. And walking back, I feel like I'm being watched from the trees out there. I'm staying in the yurts down there. I finally said, "Hey, look, I'm from the Midwest. I said I want to have an encounter type thing, but really that was just talk." And if one of y'all is about 12, the way the branches were broken by where I was staying, the signs I was given, they're about 12 feet, or about 8 feet up. So that means if you broke it at chest level, you have to be about 10 feet tall or taller. I started kind of tripping a little bit. You know what I mean? There's these rocks on my doorstep. What the hell is that? Sorry, excuse me. Heck is that? The rocks and the sticks on my doorstep. I mean, the whole way that they did it, and then I finally got blasted with the telethought, because I just said it. Okay, I said, "Look, don't step out of the bushes on me, because you're that big. I'm just gonna freak out. Just don't do it." I tried to put it out telepathically, but then I just said, "Forget it." I turned off my flashlight. I just said verbally. You know what I mean? I go sit down in the yurt that I was given out there, and I'm just kind of sitting there. Maybe took about 8 minutes, and boom, I started getting the strongest telethought, strong as the extraterrestrials I've dealt with, or star beings, or you want to call them, that type of direct telethought with pictures and emotion. And I'm sorry, I started picking up English.
Oh yeah.
Said, "Don't worry, it's against our law to be seen by you anyway, and we don't want to scare you. And you can call me elder." And then I start seeing in my, only way I can describe this to you is other sound people look at me and say, "This guy sounds nuts." But listen, this is what I get at one point at the end of this, is that I don't have a limp. I didn't know what that meant at the time. And in my mind is an image of a huge Sasquatch, albino Sasquatch, doing a backflip, and the only thing I can kind of correlate it to is, you all remember, was it 1983? There was that video Van Halen jump.
Oh yeah.
At the very end of that, David Lee Roth does like a jump, a backflip for no reason at all. It kind of looked like that, you know, and it was so odd. I found out later that they may grow until they die, and that they start developing a limp. In reference to that, MK Davis did a video called Tall Paul, the ones that are pushing themselves at the tires, pushing each other, and they're filming at that habitation. They're filming in the mirrors. They're looking back so that they'll still come around the tires and stuff. But in one of those, he's got one called Whitey's Run. Type in MK Davis and Whitey's Run. The zoom pan, it starts off this white Bigfoot. First you see it, it tears off. It goes by these cows. It goes on all fours, stands up. Then it tears off at an unreal speed across this field. Okay.
Yeah.
But before that, it just starts doing these like 2 back stands on this tree, and then just starts going around it. Yeah, back stands. Literally, they look like back stands. And then I start thinking, well, this is the same thing as this thing showing me in my mind, the backflip and all that. I mean, we don't know what we're dealing with on that. It's fascinating. So they touched. I never saw this individual, but between that and screaming at me or making the owl hoots and sounds and the broken stuff and the rocks on the doorstep, it just would really. It's just intense. I think.
It is
Anyway,
intense.
sorry, I don't want to go too far on that, but it's really
No, not at all. I love talking about this.
When I went out there in 2017, I was so tripped out on that place out there, because one is I got blasted with UFOs the very first night I'm out there. Okay, I feel like the little bit I did sleep, I was going in that mountain. All right, I was aware of something in that mountain. All right, also the Sasquatch stuff going on out there. You got a lot of people having experiences. You've got something in that mountain out there that's called the Ore Station, okay? And there's a book by J.J. Hurtak, another place where I met you, Kim, okay? So I have a copy of the Keys of Enoch. This I got in like 1994. So when you really read a book, they wind up being like that. And for whatever reason, I couldn't find it. And when I went out there at that conference, he was speaking. So he had a booth. I got him to sign this. And I asked him about this thing called a Merkaba in here, a tripyramidal Merkaba, which I've seen a ship do that. I was like, where'd you?
I've seen them too. Yeah, little, it's like a little plasma, like spinny sort of thing, and you can see a being inside, and they like ride around in them. It's incredible.
Yeah, you know, this one started off like a metal craft, and it morphs into this thing. And I've got pictures of all this on my YouTube channel. When that happened to me, and I saw this craft do that, and it morphs into this thing. I can show you the illustrations, but it turns into this thing that looks like this these balls, like with these stalagmites on them, and this light inside, and it looks like a molecule almost.
I see those all the time.
Very bizarre in the sky, and he calls them in there tripyramidal Merkaba, and he's got on page. I bet you it's the page I've got right here. This is how Spirit worked it out. Oh my, imagine that. Page 216. It just happens where that's where my bookmark is, okay? I've seen a ship do that, okay? Where you see that there saucer strike, then it goes into this. Okay, but when it turns into this tripyramidal Merkaba, I've never seen anything like that. It pushed me to the brink, actually. All right, and I know now I can tell you perspective is what I was seeing was a craft that's able to actually create a mako, a wormhole, a black hole, and then change its configuration to to match its destination. And in that case, it was, I'm pretty sure, another universe is probably based on crystalline. Everything here is based on spin. So anyway, seeing that, and it's cool. I can talk about this stuff now. And even back then, before this happened to me, I could talk about the holographic principle and all that stuff sounds real brainy and smart. But when I saw that happen, it pushed my perception, and I'm going to tell you at that spot we were talking about. Okay, the first time I'm out there, I was walking with one of the guys that worked out there. His name was Albert, and we were walking outside at the river out there. We go back in the gate. We go around this Pleiadian circle. And he's actually being quite talkative, man. So I was, I'm kind of listening to stuff, and as he's talking, I'm watching this this star that's on the side of this evergreen as he's talking, and and it starts. I swear it's like kind of moving, And after, so finally he says, "Hey," he goes, everyone calls me B. He said, "B, are you watching that? Do you see that star there?" At first I thought it was Jupiter or Venus, but then I said, "Yeah, I am." He goes, "Is it moving?" I said, "Yeah, it is, I think." And then it goes to the other side of the tree, and it starts moving outwards, okay? And it starts morphing from one spear to 5, back to 1, back to 1, okay? And at this point, Albert, he starts breathing real heavy, okay? I look over and he's kind of bend over a little bit like a football player. And this thing goes over and goes down. There's the next to Mount Adams is a place called Sleeping Lady. Okay, and it descended. It is in front of the main thing is Cat's Mountain, Cat's Peak or something. It descends by that. Okay, it descends down and goes out. Then in like 2 or 3 seconds, it re-illuminates. And when I tell you this, I'm tripping because I'm saying, okay, apparently the mountain air has gotten to a brother. Maybe it's the elevation or something, and it descended in front of the mountain and re-illuminated. Okay, and then it comes up and it does it again. There's no doubt what I was seeing. I look over and Albert's over there, woo, woo, woo. And and fortunately, I was still rational enough to know that what I was seeing, this type of delusion is not shared. Okay, and I said, "What are you seeing?" And he says, it's a trick. It's some sort of trick. It's got to be. I said, "Never mind that. What is it you're seeing?" And he said, "I can see it through the mountain. I can see it through the mountain. Is this some sort of hologram? Is this some sort of hologram?" And he looks over at me, and I look at him. I don't know. I look back at this thing, okay, and it does it again. It flashes, it goes above this mountain, and it comes back down, comes back on, and then it goes deeper and just goes out. Okay. And after that, there was a huge amount of elation. On my YouTube channel, there's a whole thing about that ranch. I did a bunch of videos about it. One of them is I'm standing out there with that young man looking probably like an idiot because that guy that ran it wanted us to do a video, and I'm jumping around like a little kid because I'm thinking, first of all, I'm thinking, well, how these people got to know that what they're seeing out here isn't fully correct? It's some sort of holographic. And James is saying, he says, "Man, they're guards stationed up there on the top of that mountain where you're talking about that thing went down. We've never known why." I'm thinking, whatever I saw, the big brother, whatever you want to call that organization, may know about it, but it's not them. It can't be. To a point to where, I'm too curious. Now that I work with Jessica Jones, I give her these blind targets. I gave her that mountain range, see what she saw inside, what I saw when I went underneath regression. You know what I mean? Because so much information comes to each of us when we have an exciting like that. And it's always at these conferences, the people that come up to me and go, I've never had experiences like yours. I'm not an experiencer, and they have that energy on them. I stole a term from Doctor Who called Artron energy. When you're actually on board one of these craft that actually is got an engine, a power source that's temporally displaced, you know what I mean, multidimensional to a degree, and using black holes and that type of energy, or around the beings that are giving their Kundalini energy to power source the craft, a symbiotic exchange, you get irradiated by some type of a higher type of energy. I don't know if it's high energy plasma or what is, but it irradiates the cells of the contactee. And when I get around people like Miss Kim here, I can feel it on real people that are contactees. And that's without being a jerk. I will say how many people we meet that are these big names and they don't have that Artron energy on them. Well, why not? What happened? But anyway,
Yeah. Gina, you probably, I think you might have picked up more of like a fae or the creatures that are down here. Like if I would pick up anything, it would be more like that. Okay, so there's one thing that I want to ask, or one thing that I want to bring up from the beginning of the story when you were talking about Bigfoot and how you saw him they told you that they were very tall, like 8 to 12 feet. When you said that's what you said, right, Barry?
No, didn't have a limp, and they might grow until they die. Some of them, and the ones that
Yeah.
are really tall have a limp sometimes. That's also proven, I think, in Meldrum's footprints, the bigger ones.
Okay. And you saw branches broken at like 12 feet, maybe?
About 8 feet up in the back of
Okay.
that yurt back there.
When you said that, I got this like almost like an epiphany feeling that I wonder if sometimes when we have in real life, scientifically, discovered burial sites with giants, I wonder if some of them are Sasquatch. I know that's super random.
You know, it's a good question. You know, I did another video I've done. It's over Lord Henneman, who was the you getting chills over there?
Yeah.
which was the monkey god and from India. Okay, the gurus are dealt with, but there's supposedly these huge footprints that show him that he was supposed to be jumping from mountain range to mountain range. He's supposed to be a giant. It was like 30 feet tall. Okay, and that whole era. And we start looking at some ancient Indian texts like that. They start talking about a lot of these giants that were here at that time. Okay, but the thing about these giant footprints, if you look up where those are,
Africa.
But
in Africa,
yeah, but you know, there's one that they say that at night sometimes there are these creatures seen around it that are called the Venara, and the Venara sound similar to Sasquatch or similar to Orang Pendek, but they have these tails. And most Sasquatch don't have tails. They're supposed to have tails like monkeys. And they're supposed to be doing these rituals sometimes, like around these footprints at night. So that's just, food for thought on that.
But I actually had a really interesting experience yesterday, which was really weird, and I didn't really know what to think about it. So I have where I live is a pretty rural area, and there's woods everywhere. And there's a particular area that I go out to with my dogs where I've had some physical Sasquatch sightings, and it's where I started seeing prints and everything. And so I was walking around in the woods, having a great time. And we get to the end of our walk, and I get to my van, and I'm letting the dogs into the van, and I look off into the trees, and I saw this big black shape come out from behind a tree, but then disappear immediately, like shut off, like just completely. It's almost like a switch in frequency or something. It was like I saw somebody, and I definitely saw somebody come out from behind the tree, but then it was almost like they walked through a door, and it was invisible after that. And I was like, you guys, what do you do? Like, they are incredible.
Did you see it straight on or in your peripheral?
Oh, straight on.
That's so cool. Wow.
Yeah, it was really, I'm starting to see them more. I feel like they're kind of showing up a bit more lately for me. But yeah, it was really strange.
I firmly believe that they use trees to manifest and to also for these things we call spiritual powers. And it's a matter of, because when you do these things, the energy has to come from somewhere. And the first thing I met this individual the second year I spoke out there, and his name was Tom Powell. And he was quite life-changing in terms of the stuff he was telling me. And because we're standing in the line waiting to eat, and I wonder if there's anything a brother that's, an omnivore can actually digest. And he said, well, Barry, I'm really not the UFO guy. I'm the Bigfoot guy, but yada, yada. And I said, oh, really? And so we started talking. I told him what happened to me the year before out there. And he started saying things to me that was really odd. Enough to where we kept hanging out and talking. He's like, somebody like you should get a trash bag, go walk around the forest and pick up trash. You'll get their attention just like that.
Oh, yeah.
And he actually had me put a leaf. He put a face on it, had me put it where these rocks are on my doorstep the year before. One of the conditions of me going out there was one of the same yurt, just because of the stuff that was happening, And I had an experience with a squirrel out there that was no doubt connected to the Sasquatch, and I have no doubt that they can shapeshift. But I also believe that their relationship with trees, In Europe, they have a thing called the Green Man. I did a video over the Green Man and Sasquatch. I think we may be dealing with the same thing. I'm not saying that they all can do it. I don't know if it's just the shamans or the medicine men that have the ability of invisibility and these other things. You know, just scientifically, there's something that they can do with the oil. The oil on their hair alone is a type of refracting of oil. You know, that's called the oh Lord, I want to say kerosene. It's not kerosene. It's a way that actually the oil bends the light like that. Like, for example, the third year I went out there, I took these, I went and got these apples, like some red ones and some green ones, and I tried to put up these little setups behind this place I was at. There's a lot of people out there, but not many people down where I was staying. And, you know, the apples started getting moved around, and I started seeing them look like they were being bit in. But it turns out that they were like these robins would come out. You don't understand. I'm like a ninja. I was always set on stuff. And I watched these robins come out and peck only the red apples. And that's why the green ones were being moved. And one of them was moved. There's a small footprint out there, but it wasn't like full. Like if I want to just do it sideways, just to mess with somebody. You know what I mean? And then I really started tripping out. I said, my God, whoever this is not just watching me. All these people out there is the biggest deal they ever had, I think. And it's watching the robins only come out and eat the red ones. That's why it's messing with the green ones only and communicating with me and moving the structures with the pine cones where I was doing it, moving it like 20 feet away. I knew it wasn't anyone else doing this. It really started messing with me. So, you know, for 3 years, that's the only year my camera actually worked for whatever reason. For a reason, my phone camera always would go out or my phone start malfunctioning before I get there. This year I had a camera. So I took pictures of that yurt and stuff. I was just tripped out. Man, how am I getting beat? I just did a video on invisibility. And I'm getting beat with my own stuff. More than that. You know what I mean? I made this video and I sat out and this lady from, she's African. She lives in London now. And she says, I want you to know, she's asked me, she's asked me questions, emailed me, how big is that yurt? And I said, probably about, 12 feet up or so. She said, you definitely weren't alone. And I just want you to know this isn't pareidolia. This is one of the things I can see this. And she sends my own pictures back to me with these circles around them. And it looks like you can see an individual holding the tree, looking down at me, a little taller than this yurt. And because I said, the fact I had a camera, I must have took like 25 pictures out there looking for the Peter Parker image, but I got maybe 4 ones that I kept and I erased all the others. But on several of these 4 or 5, she started pointing this out because I kept wondering. I was like, how am I getting beat? And you can hear things about how they reflect light and it looks predator-like and stuff. You can see that on my channel under the ECETI Ranch video playlist. That one is called Sasquatch Confirmations. Check out that video. You'll see all the pictures on there and the circles, and it blew me away. But I mean, it makes me think of really, okay, is it true they can stand somewhere still for almost a day, just waiting for someone, or pretending to be a log for a day, waiting, or 2 days waiting for somebody to come? That type of patience and that type of spiritual involvement, you know,
time doesn't exist, so yeah.
Also, I know that, I mean, we know they're masters of energy, so who knows like where the bounds are within that. But I've gotten audio recordings of them in my house. I've had them move stuff around in my house. I've had them leave apples in my tree with a giant bite taken out of them. I've taken pictures in the woods and seen like kind of like astral shapes of them in the tree line. And then after I look at these pictures and I'm sending them to my friends who also have a connection to the Sasquatch people, the picture altered and changed and the image disappeared. And I asked them, with my mind, I was like, why did that happen? And they answered, because we wanted to show you what we could do. So I mean, they can manipulate energy like it's nothing, especially electronics. So I feel like there's many ways they can shapeshift. They can like change their frequency and like just kind of disappear. And
Tom told me some stories that were worth mentioning. One was, he said he's an interesting guy named One. He's just the way he talks and stuff, but he's got this. He said that he was ate blood and flesh guy at first, and he started going somewhere around Mount Hood, and there was a place out there, there's a ranch that were having a bunch of activity or something, and he was out there setting up his traps and knocking on the trees, doing all that stuff. He wasn't getting anything. He was never ever to get anything of these beings on camera, and he got a little frustrated, but it seemed like they definitely knew how to avoid him, and he started hearing more about people talking about mind speak and telepathy with him. And one day he mentions it to this farmer out there and his wife and says, people talk about this mind speak. The farmer says, "Oh yeah, we get that here." Says, "My wife gets a lot more like me, and our daughter more than both of us." As in fact, they're trying to get our daughter to go out the other night, out and play at night when she shouldn't be out there. And then the wife says, "Matter of fact, I started smoking again. I was out on the porch and they were giving me mind speak the other night." And Tom's like, "Well, what were they saying?" "Stop trying to trick us." And he looks at me, he said, "Barry, I knew they were talking about me and the cameras." He said, so I asked her, "Can you tell them to step in front of the camera?" So she went out there and asked them. They said, "No." He said, but then that night he got these images that were these huge shadows on the camera, like he just had never got before. He said, "I can't say it was them, but it was bizarre." He says, so then I had her ask, actually it was to give him a bone, okay? If they give him a bone, and they didn't respond, but when he goes out to the gifting place, there is a bone in the ground. So he takes this bone, he goes all crazy and says he was a Sasquatch bone or whatever it takes to get analyzed. And when it's analyzed, it's an emu bone. And I guess the lady's dad had like, I don't know, so many miles away an emu farm. And he's looking at me, he says, "Man, that's when I realized these beings have a sense of humor." He says, "Barry, I never
God, they are so funny.
Never ask him what kind of bone." I start laughing. And he says, then I'm out there trying to I'm banging on sticks and doing all this stuff, and I was getting nothing. So I put my camera away and everything, and I drive home. It's 2 hours to get to where I lived. And I get there, the sun's coming up and stuff. I'm pulling out my cameras out of the camera and I out of the trunk, and I get return responses on my property for what I was doing. He said, "I knew what they were doing. They were saying you were out there being an idiot, banging on sticks, trying to mess with us. So we're going to mess with you, and you figured it out." And he starts looking at me. He goes, "Barry, you know the 100 monkey thing, right?" I said, "Yeah, that's when they're on the island, and they teach these monkeys to drum on the island, and other islands, these monkeys just start doing it automatically." He said, "Unless it's that, or they're moving like the Flash, the superhero, they have to be using portals."
They do use portals. They absolutely do. That's how they travel around. I mean, at least that's what they told me around here is that's how they find food. That's how they have their certain spots and they travel through portals. So yeah, you're definitely right about that.
On YouTube, there's a guy that goes by Man of Light. If you type in Man of Light and Bigfoot tree manifestation, his stuff will come up. And he's got these trees he takes these pictures of, and these photos, and you can see like a Sasquatch face on there on some of these trees. And I've heard before that some of this knocking that we're hearing is not just them using their throats also, but when they actually use one of these trees to like teleport or manifest, it's the knocking you hear and it burns out the tree. They can only use a tree once or twice and have to give it time for it to regenerate. And that's the only guy, that Man of Light on there, that has pictures of them using these things as portal. It's quite interesting, and I think that's one of the things that isn't so, what's the word these people use now? Oh, woo woo. I don't think it's very woo woo. I think it's more reality, And we think about things like Carlos Castaneda and the Toltecs and some of the abilities that they had with just manipulating perception. We're dealing with species that have been here since this was a type 1 civilization, you know?
Hmm.
And that's, things of that nature. I think this is very interesting, and more will come to light eventually once we incorporate it more consciousness and not the hunting species, you know.
Well, I mean, how would you like it if somebody like banged down your door, came into your living room with a gun and a net and like, cameras and all this stuff? Like, it's so it's disrespectful. And I understand that's like the human mindset that's like, this thing has to be 3D. It's got to be, it's got to be physical, and it's got to be an ape, and, we're going to catch one. But that's not how they operate. So, I mean, I feel like if you go out to the woods and you just have an open heart, you go out and play Frisbee with your dog, or you like go, play a drum or a guitar out in the woods. They love that sort of stuff. They love it. They love seeing us have fun and play around, and they love kids. They just love that, like that heart energy. That's what they respond to. Hey, so I wanted to, sorry to kind of like switch directions, but I wanted to talk about your life a little bit. Like, you seem like you've had an insane, incredible life. And so I kind of wanted to talk about some of your ET experiences and like what's the deal, Barry?
Well, started for me, I think, and something I say to people is that I'm by no means special. And I've always had the theory that around 75 to 80% of our population has had contact, and most are unaware of it. And so far, with the platform creator has given me so far, I've seen nothing to disprove that. But it sometimes happens on a level that's almost a superconscious or subconscious, and it's hard to recall it. For me, it started when I was a kid. I started, waking up not at home sometimes, and like this place that was like it had like a table in it, and these things on there, like a feather on this black table, this feather, and then this bowl of water, and then these balls. And the first thing you learn how to do is move the water with your mind, like stir it. Move the feather. Excuse me. The second thing is to stir the bottle, the bowl of water, and the third thing is to move these balls. And I'd be going through that at night, and during the next day, it felt like I'd not slept. You know what I mean? Really, really tired. And I didn't reckon that, but I thought, as a child, well, it's just I got a super good imagination. My imagination is so good that it's like Sesame Street worthy. That type of a thing, But in reality, these were experiences that were happening. I hear people now like Whitley Strieber and other people calling that the mystery school and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
I have that
and
book
then
around here somewhere. It's a good book.
Yeah. Interesting individual. My friend Alexis Brooks did a little workshop with him.
I love her. Yeah, she's great.
Oh, she's cool. She actually blew my cover. That I didn't want anyone to know that. It's bad enough people find out I was a hypnotist or a contactee, but I didn't want anyone to know that I was a hypnotist. And she found out that I did Earthbound Spirit release sometimes, and it went public, and I wound up doing a bunch of them now. And that's dealing with Earthbound Spirits. When I say that, in a mediumship, a way I can detect, spirits on the outside of somebody that's attached, and they'll, give you survival evidence or whatever it is you need. But these are different. These are spirits that are inside the energy field. Okay. And they're attached to a part of trauma normally, and they're so entwined with the energy field that you can't detect them. And I'm not talking about the demonic level. I'm talking about people like grandma and grandpa that didn't cross over because they couldn't let the house go, or their addictions, or when they're gone, somebody's leaning over their body going, "Oh God, please don't go." And then they won't go. You know what I mean? With that free will is a lot for us to stay here, more than what we think. It's easier. So anyway, that's how I come to be doing that. And it's fascinating. Sometimes another thing we'll do with that is I'll tell you about a past life regression I did that involved Sasquatch of a very high top. But anyway, that's not the question. Anyway,
I think we need a whole series on Barry Littleton.
I know. We're going to have you on a couple of times, I hope.
Well, as far as me, I had these experiences when I was a kid, and they were really intense. Okay. And then I had one in the 6th grade that I knew these are physical. In the 6th grade, I had one that I called the acid rain experience. and it's where I woke up on board this craft. And it was, I mean, this one was a big one, and it's got most of these craft I'm in on board don't have windows because they're organic, but this one there's like a projector there, like I guess they kind of created, but out of it I can see these other craft out. There's 3 other craft, saucer types, kind of large, and it looks like 2 of them look like they're sucking up almost clouds into them. I know now it was smog they were sucking up, and this being that's insectoid is floating over the rails, and it starts telling me telepathy, and it was disturbing because this being is, first of all, not just as a telethought experience, but the being starts answering my questions before I can formulate them in my mind. That's disturbing to a degree. It's not that it's an assault, it's just not normal in the way we process things, you know. So I'm picking up, you know, the acid rain is very bad for your planet, and the metals in your atmosphere is part of the reason some of us don't come out of these craft. It's very dangerous. I didn't know what that was. And acid rain, I never heard that word. You know what I mean? And so then, and this is like over a pass, a mountain pass. I've never seen anything like that. Okay, I'm from the Midwest, and I've seen mountains like that with the snow caps on them. And then about maybe a week later, it's a Friday, our teacher, I was in the 6th grade, my teacher would have us read something called the Scholastic News, and she would choose a good child to go up there and get traumatized, have to read it in front of everybody. You know what I mean? You know how stressful that is.
Yeah.
You mispronounce a few words, people are like, oh, you can't read. You know what I mean? And she chose chose me that day. I go up there, and I'll never forget it, because on the front of the Scholastic News was a picture of the Statue of Liberty. And the article I had to read, the main one, was that the Statue of Liberty was shut down for an amount of time to be reconstructed and repainted from damage that was done by acid rain. And when I remember saying that out real loud, the acid rain, people started laughing. But it's when this stuff that was happening to me at night definitely crossed over into my normal day school life. It seemed just as real, but there was no proof. You know, it's the first time I had some definite proof of that. You know what I mean? So that, and then after that, experiences started kind of slowing off from like the time I was almost to about 13 to about 16, about 17, they start kicking up again. So I call those childhood experiences. Then they went into adult onset experiences. And that involved 4 specific experiences that averaged 4 hours of missing time each. About 4.5 of missing time each. And 3 of those, somebody else is with me. It's one thing if I sit up and tell you, hey, I've been having these encounters my whole life. Yeah, right. If you can even tell anybody. But it's another thing, you're out in the country with somebody sitting at a fishing pond or something, and these ships come up. And you're in telepathic communication with them, and and it's all tripped out. All of a sudden, you're there, and you're missing like 4 hours of time. But you can still see the beings in your mind's eye. You can see the technology. You know you've been there. But the further, you get from the event horizon, the harder the retaining of memory, the retention of memory is, the more it gets fragmented. You know, for one, and, you know, that happened to the person I was with too. And they weren't with me at all times, like on board this ship that I know of. You know, I think we can maybe go on certain places that we're energetically fit for, perceptually fit for, you know, but the information coming back was saying they had a bunch of info, and we're saying all this heavy stuff. I'm trying to drive back down, you know what I mean? Trying to get to a recorder or some pen and paper or something. By the time I get to where the 15 miles is to get to town, she's looking at me going, what happened? I'm looking like, God. I remember it's slipping more, and they're like, and, you know, then the fact there are no contactees that look like me. Okay, that was always a problem for me. Very few. You had Barney Hill, and he got jacked.
Barney Hill, that was about it.
That wasn't really, you know, encouraging at all. And the beings I'm seeing in my mind's eye that I've just been interacting with were not like anything I've seen. They weren't grays, they weren't reptiles, or none of these things. Okay, so those 2 things alone make for a little bit of, you know, it's gonna it makes you just trot, to say the least. You know what I mean? But anyway, but going further with that, it's the missing time and things like that, and the fragmented time, I think people need to really pay attention to. And the thing is, because consciously, even I mentioned earlier, some people at these conferences, they say, I'm going to contact you like you, but they have that Artron energy, like I felt on Kim. And the truth is, and I'll say, well, funny, you sure do feel like one. I'll be like, all right, my name's I'll say, you seen a UFO? And be like, yeah, a couple of times. I said, one time, did you see one, maybe 10 seconds or something? You're with other people and you're looking at it, you say something, other people go, where? And it's right there. Maybe one other person can see it and nobody else can. And they look at me, they go, well, yeah, how'd you know that? Say, you wouldn't think that if it's Star Trek wise, you wouldn't think the whole Federation stopped what they're doing to collectively communicate with only you. And that's exactly what's going on. And it happens on the superconscious level, the subconscious level. And it's like even worse when we dream. A lot of people can't remember their dreams. Some can, gifted people, but a lot of us can't. It's difficult. You have to work at it. You know what I mean? But these people, these encounters are kind of like that in the same way. And, I used to think, first it made me really evaluate and learn hypnosis and other things. Was I suffering from screen memories? And this elation I get from these non-humans. I'm sorry, sometimes I'd be charged up after those encounters. And it's kind of like what the gurus call the Shakti pat, when the guru touches the student and the apprentice, and all their chakras start turning, the Kundalini releases. It's called Shakti pat. Yeah. For Carlos Castaneda, Don Juan used to slap him in the middle of the back and push his assemblage point and totally change his perception. But it's similar when being around these non-humans, something about their biofield that's that's elating. And I can see why a primitive person would call them gods or something when they're not, but they're just on that level of vibration. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then more to make it worse, I think maybe you've experienced this, Kim, is that when you're not, and some of them may be physical, like you and me, humanoids to a degree, but when you're not face to face with them anymore, it's hard to remember like who you were. You were just dealing with somebody, talking to somebody, but who was it? What it gets, as my older brother would say, it gets like that, man. Is anyway, but just saying, and then people that have like sorry, I'm jumping around too much.
No.
Oh no, you're good.
Someone that has seen a craft like that, and I'll ask later, maybe a few nights later, do you have weird dreams? Weird people, weird places, weird beings. It'll be like sometimes, yeah. And I'll say it behooves one to undergo a hypnotic regression to see just for that time what information was communicated to your superconscious during that millisecond, those few milliseconds. You'd be surprised. That's the way contact is going down, but we're not expanding our parameters enough to do with that. Right now, we want to hear fantastical stories about battling reptilians on Mars and, all these things that may be happening. I don't know, but I mean, it's not things that help.
They seem
our
like
lives.
distractions.
I agree. They don't help our lives as contactees. And more than that, we've got organizations that are targeting people like us that are contactees before we even incarnate.